talking to parents as much as I get to talk to them now, I understand like, okay, one of my hurdles was pregnancy, and maybe somebody else had a great pregnancy, but it was really hard for them to get pregnant in the first place, or maybe a very traumatic labor, so on and so forth. Yeah. Understanding like, okay, like we all have our cards that we draw, but that no matter what, it's going to test us one way or the other at some point, and that becoming like the empowering, to me, empowering and united factor that like we're all in it, even if our experiences look different, that I felt like was such a gift.
Hi, my name is Courtney Peebles, and I'm the owner and founder of Solobo Toys. And today on Neuroplay, we're going to be talking with Chandler. She is the owner of The Den, and it is a family-friendly social lounge and coffee shop. Well, thank you so much for getting on here. I have been super excited to talk to you about just like The Den and how it started and you and everything. And I read like your backstory on your website. You know, I did all my due diligence to look into everything, but of course it's different when it's like you're telling the story.
Yeah.
So just like take me back to like before you had kids and before The Den. Like, what did you do for a living?
Okay, so I worked in fashion. We lived in New York City for a while. So I went to school in New York, and then I worked in fashion in New York, and I did like HR or account management. Mostly every job I've ever had has been project management. So whether that's in whatever vein it is, you know, it always applied to being a project. I would usually like start in one role and then transition to a project, then move to the next company and start a project there. Yeah, and so we lived in New York for 9 years, and we lived in San Francisco for 4, I want to say. So I was working directly in-house for fashion companies in New York, and then in San Francisco, I worked for a tech company who tracked influencer marketing. So like my clients would be L'Oreal or like LVMH, and we'd be tracking their earned media value. So how like organic conversations were happening about them. So that's what I did previous to this.
Okay, and on your website, it says that when you got pregnant, you traveled to Europe often?
I was traveling to Europe before I got pregnant. So they moved me. So L'Oreal is headquartered in New York and Paris. And so L'Oreal was a big client of mine. And then I transitioned into this role called solutions manager. So I was kind of like a person to deal with problems for our bigger companies. And so I would go to Paris, and there was just a lot of other businesses in Paris, but like L'Oreal had lots of different European offices, so I would be going there, and then I got really sick in my first pregnancy, and 8-9 hour flights were just not feasible. So that kind of put a hamper on that, though the company was really kind and they tried to work with me, but when you're that sick, you're like, you can't even, it's like one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I never handled like nausea well.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be in bed all the time.
Oh my God.
I was just like, there's no way.
Were you nauseous throughout your pregnancy? Was it like this first trimester?
So it was, for my first son, it was like I wasn't throwing up, but it was like crippling nausea to the point where I was like, I can't even walk around the house without feeling like I'm either going to pass out or throw up, which I'm like deathly afraid of throwing up. So I would like do anything to avoid it. So I would I'd go sit still and be like, I'm not throwing up. I'm not throwing up. But then it kind of stopped through my second trimester, but with my older son, I had some like crazy complications because I had an undiagnosed autoimmune disease.
Oh my God.
So it was actually through my son's pregnancy that I found out about it, because my body was freaking out. My son was completely healthy. There was no issues with him, but like I felt like I was going to pass out. My heart rate was like through the roof. Like all these crazy things were happening, and I was like, something's wrong.
Did the doctors, how was the interaction you had with doctors or midwives in terms of you telling them you felt like something was wrong?
They didn't believe me. Which I know is such a common thing, but it's just
like,
so
what? So, do we swear on this, or we can't swear?
No, you can swear. Yeah.
Look, it's just so live in our bodies. And it's like every woman has, I'm sure every person, you know, but has these experiences of like you trying to advocate yourself, but it's like so dystopian because you're trying to advocate to the people that you think know more than you, and you're like, okay, I guess I suck. I don't know.
I know.
That's so awful.
I literally had this, I was in the emergency room a lot because like crazy stuff was happening. And it was funny because I went to the emergency room one night with my husband, and the nurse literally like held my hand and was like, "Are you sure you're not just stressed?" And I was like, oh my God, please let me out of this hospital right now. I'm gonna lose my mind. And then it was like towards the end of my pregnancy, it was when I found out one doctor was super smart to run a specific test, and they found out. And then I had to go to the emergency room again, like per my doctor's orders. And it was the same nurse, and she was like, "Oh, so they figured out that it was like something?" And I was like, "Yes, it was something."
Frustrating. And it's like, you know, they can't know everything, but if there was this way for us to, I don't know, have a little more trust in the people.
I know.
But I'm sure that's just, yeah.
What is that?
So is it going now, this autoimmune?
Yeah, so it's something that's been with me forever. I just didn't know about it because it gets exacerbated, is that the word, during pregnancy. So when I found out, then they were able to track me better. For my second pregnancy, it was like completely uneventful. Like I was, you know, had the same nausea and typical pregnancy symptoms, but it was definitely not like my first. That was a whirlwind.
God, that's great. So they had medication that they gave you?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I'm glad that you could figure those things out, and like good for you also for sticking with being like, no, something's off. And yeah. How did you deal with like the emotional piece of all of that?
Oh, it was a lot. I literally couldn't work, which, you know, from what I read, you couldn't work either once you got to a certain point. Yeah. I was like, just wanted to be in bed. And it was like, I did not like being pregnant at all.
Me neither.
Yeah. It's like, and they don't, doctors are, once you get a good doctor, it's like awesome. Mm-hmm. But then if you have to like navigate these other doctors, it's like the worst.
Oh, yeah. I had 2 OBs. One who I just was like, what's happening here? But then the second one was a good OB. She was a lovely person, but I just didn't feel safe enough. And I was like, I don't know, I'm just going to switch. And then I found midwives, and that really changed the game. But not until I was 32 weeks pregnant did I find that. And that can be really hard to like trust that you know that there's something out there that you're looking for.
Yeah. And it's so hard too, because it's like, if you go on like Google and you like Google OBs or midwives or anything, some like weird stuff comes up. Like people have their like scary reviews and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I know? And so, you know, I relied a lot on like friend recommendations. But the OB practice that I was with was like the rotating, where they like rotate out the doctors.
Yeah.
And I was just like, how do I know who I'm going to deliver with?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was chaotic.
Yeah. And this was, I have to fix my hair because to me, I keep looking at myself and I'm like, oh, it looks like I like took all my extensions out. And I'm like, what's going on here? So I'm just going to just be vain while we're talking here.
Oh, you're good.
Where did you deliver?
So with my oldest son, I delivered in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Okay.
And then with my youngest son, I delivered in Richmond, Virginia. My youngest son, he was like a pandemic baby. Like I was pregnant during the pandemic, which I actually liked better because
I hated pregnancy so much. I was like, oh, can't go. There's like a fucking virus out there. Sorry.
I know. I was like, I'm just going to lay in bed. It's fine.
Yeah, totally same.
So how old are your kids?
My daughter is 4, just over 4, and my son is just over 2.
Okay, so I think we've talked about this before because my youngest, he's 2.5, and then my oldest, he'll be 4 in December.
Okay, yeah, it's I like the age difference. Like they fight like cats and dogs, and they play really well together. But it's a nice, and I'm glad it's out of the way, quite frankly. So,
yes.
yeah.
I like them being close in age, and I knew that because I hated being pregnant so much, it was convenient to get pregnant during the pandemic.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the sweatpants that I wore, man, they like should be framed. Like these should be for pregnancy and COVID. But yeah, I was happy to like stay in for all of that.
So during your first pregnancy was when you stopped working.
Yeah. So, excuse me. Because I was traveling a lot and I was in sales, like it was sales and solution management. And so I was on calls all of the time, and I worked at a tech company. So I was the only person going through pregnancy, and everybody was so kind, but they couldn't understand what I was going through.
Yeah.
So that kind of created this like isolating echo chamber in my brain that was like, you suck at pregnancy, at being a person. Like it was perinatal depression, but I didn't know that. I didn't even know that existed. And so being in that slump, and like no matter how, our CEO was so wonderful and he was trying to make it work, but I was just so sad and struggling and sick, and I just was like, I just need to quit. I didn't care about anything anymore. So that was it is what it is. It happened, but it definitely spiraled into a dark place for me. Not having anywhere to go to or community, and really kind of losing some sense of self. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I feel like this is something that you have talked about on the Den's website, and it's something that I think so many people want to talk about, but I think there's like a level of it being talked about more now.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I was pregnant with my first son, like people have this like set things that they say when somebody's pregnant. They're like, aren't you feeling that glow? It's like, I'm miserable.
Yeah, I think that's quite a trippy experience in like really getting in touch with just how different everybody's body is, because like I have women who are like, I feel so warm when I'm pregnant, like physically good and warm and like here. And it's like, wow, like we really are built so differently, every single person's individual bodies, and like just having a crash course in that by going through pregnancy. And I mean, the comparisons that come with that, I don't know if you felt that way, but if I was feeling disgusting and like having the doctors like hyper fixated on my weight gain while like somebody else is like, yeah, I went for like a 9-mile jog while I'm pregnant. And I'm like, I know. I'm so jealous and I feel so small. And like, it just was hard.
I know. And it's just a mess. Like the fact that everybody experiences it differently is what makes it so mind-boggling that people still like say like the same kind of things, that like, oh, pregnancy is a blessing. And like, obviously I love my kids, of course. Yeah. But I'm not going to like sugarcoat that pregnancy was hard. Mm-hmm. Like I will never do it again. Yeah. I love my kids, but that's it.
Yep, me too. I'll never do it again. I'm grateful that I was able to do it. And I think talking to parents as much as I get to talk to them now, I understand like, okay, one of my hurdles was pregnancy, and maybe somebody else had a great pregnancy, but it was really hard for them to get pregnant in the first place, or maybe had a very traumatic labor, so on and so forth. Understanding like, okay, like we all have our cards that we draw, but that no matter what, it's going to test us one way or the other at some point, and that becoming like the empowering and united factor that like we're all in it, even if our experiences look different. That I felt like was such a gift.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I find so like cool about the space that you've built. And obviously I've never been there. Like I'm in Virginia, I've never been there, but like I see the photos, I see the videos, but like it's very clear to me that you like want to hear from the people that are there. And I think that that's really different, because I know like people start businesses for all sorts of reasons, but from what I gather, like you started yours so that you could be a community. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Yeah,
exactly. So after my first after I got out of my own funk a little bit, I started working on this warm line called Postpartum Support International. Way less severe than a suicide hotline, but nonetheless, like still a place that you're like, I'm in a dark place. I don't know who to turn to anymore. I'm not even sure what's going on for myself. I'm going to call this warm line and talk to these people. And so I was a warm line attendant, and I talked to hundreds and hundreds of people there. And Postpartum Support International is beautiful. They do such a phenomenal job, and you really take someone and you create space for them when you're talking to them on the phone, and you find out where they are and if they want to be connected to local resources. And so I saw how impactful that was, and what I would continuously walk away from my shift thinking was, if only caller 1 could be connected to caller 7, like that would be really fulfilling for them. And I think that maybe, because I remember when I was so sad and my midwife, bless her, would be like, is there somebody you can take a walk with? And I'd be like, sure. Yeah. And that's 2 fucking hours out of my whole week until I talk to somebody again, where I'm so sad. And like, is there a place that I could just drop into? Like, I always had this idea, like, I'd be like, God, I just want to go into like a hair salon and have like 3 women be like, oh, sweetie, like that's so hard. And like, I was like, can we create the den to be a place that's respectfully taking inspiration from Postpartum Support International, in that you're listening and you make somebody feel caught and seen and heard, and you can connect them to resources, and you can connect them to community and other people. Yeah. So that's kind of the goal behind the space. And the places that I was able to take my daughter that felt, you know, like family friendly were great for her. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't know who I am. Like, she's happy if I give her a couple of cardboard paper rolls. Like, but I'm sad, and like, I don't know who I am. And when I go to these spaces that are all about like little kids and decorated in primary colors, I'm like, okay, that only affirmed for me that there wasn't space for me in the world anymore, and that like this was my one role, and I better be really fucking good at it, because that's it. And and it wasn't working for me. So having a space that feels like, okay, it's decorated for adults and kids to coexist, and we're going to talk about it's for us and them, and that's kind of the goal of all of it.
I mean, but it's so true. Like, when we lived in Virginia Beach, I think it's probably changed now. I mean, I think probably. There was no space that was like kid friendly. Mm-hmm. Like, there was parks, sure, but there was nothing like that. And Richmond was the same way. There was nothing. And so it's funny, because it's like, you would think that because a lot of parents that I've talked to, at least, feel the same way that you and I felt, you would think that there would be more things like the den, but there's not.
Yeah, I think there are places in Europe or sometimes Canada that might exist, and I think in America, being a new business that's bringing what I believe is a new concept to our market, it's interesting because, one, like, I'm still in it, and so I can still connect to it because I still have little kids, but that's hard to like do something while you have little kids. But two, like, the adoption curve has been interesting in teaching consumers, like patrons, what the den is and why we're doing what we're doing and how we structure pricing and all of these things. It's a lot of education comes with it for people to decide that they want to try it out. And I imagine that might be one of the hurdles of trying to bring something like this to market. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I literally just had a conversation with somebody else who owns a place, like a specific play space, and she's in north of Chicago.
Okay.
And her space is literally nothing that I've ever seen before. Because, like, in the nature of what we do, I connect with a lot of people who have play space type places. But hers is very much like, similar to you, like, she wants to connect to the people that come in. Mm-hmm. Like, she doesn't want to just sit up the front, check them in, and like, they're back there, whatever. She wants to be involved. And I think that is the element that is probably missing from a lot of the places, is that the person like you who owns the space is involved and wanting to be involved in the lives of the people that come.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of, I don't know the right word to put to that, but you know, to be in all places at once and also figure out where boundaries lie for each different person, for how you like, does this person just want to get work done? Does this person really want community? And like creating a curated experience is not for everybody, I guess.
Yeah. I don't like going to places that are like super kiddie and then like that's it. But then I also don't like going to places where my youngest son, he has CP, cerebral palsy.
Okay.
And so like with him, there's a lot of safety risks, like that he is for just himself. When I came across your page, I was like, number one, I'd never seen anything like this before. Number two, I was like, this is genius, like for lack of better words. And it was like, if it was everywhere, like that would be something me and my husband would go to. Mm-hmm. And especially too, because like from what I've seen from your pictures, it's relatively simple. Yeah. Like it's not busy and like, you know, like you said, it's fit for adults and kids. Yeah. And like my kids don't like the busy places. Mm-hmm. They're just like quieter kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you touch on a lot of good points. One, we as parents have to think about ourselves and what we want and what our kids want. And so like figuring out what's a safe space for your son and feels approachable and like welcoming for him, and then for you to be able to relax for like your needs, and also so that you don't have to worry about him as much. We're always worrying about our kids. But I think that like all of that comes into like, you know, making the right potion for a space. And I would agree, like the people who are attracted to my space, I find, have some similar values, and so that makes it also easier to then create community. So I think when people are building spaces that might be just somewhat more niche, that's okay, because then you attract those niche consumers who are looking for it. And to your point, we don't have too much going on, because again, I have two kids. They came with me through we were coming to the den all the time through construction and everything, and I just watch like, what are they playing with? What are they not playing with? Do we need 700 pretend groceries, or do we need like 24 of them? Like, yes. Right? Like they're just gonna like put them in weird crevices anyways, and so figuring out like, okay, like what's enough? Like I think marketing in general is really interesting towards parents these days, because like we always, I think they can speak to us as if we don't have enough stuff, and we always need more things to make sure our kids are safe and they're growing correctly and all of these things. So you have this mentality that's like, do I have enough? And like, then you look at like, not that I want to live in the 1950s, or I don't even know. That's totally the wrong time. I'm totally not a historian. But I like the country that I live in. But like, you know, people were happy with some pretty simple, look at all those kids with a stick and a hoop back in the day, you know?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't, overcomplicate things.
It's simple.
Yeah. Yeah, like your toys. I think that your toys are a beautiful, simple way to connect and, have conversation without it being like all these like tricked out lights where you're like, I need to take a nap after that toy.
I know. Well, and that's the thing, like that is where a lot of the, like the way that you described your space, like it being like for adults and for kids, that's how I approached our toys, because I wanted our toys to be able to exist on a shelf that wasn't necessarily a toy shelf. Yeah. Like that was just some shelf that we had in our living room that was a space that was our space and theirs. Mm-hmm. So like that's where my thought process was for so much of it, because I was like, no matter what, like we are still adults and we have like friends come over, and if we have a rainbow colored toy or something that is at every crevice, like I don't want it to look like that. Yeah. And that's, my preference, but I know that a lot of parents share that. They're like, I don't want somebody to walk into my house and see like these like crazy toys with all these sounds and whatever. And it's like, I'm not opposed to toys that are like that. I think that sometimes they serve their purpose. And I'm not even saying that I only have my toys, because that would be not true. But I think that simplicity is good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, listen, we have a basement full of shit, right? Like there's definitely like crazy stuff happening in my house in places. To have like the right to want to feel some level of relaxation in your home as a parent, I think for me, I can only speak for myself, makes me have an easier time connecting with my kids and being present with them, because I'm not so overwhelmed by like a weird dog toy that has a battery in it and it's like kind of dying and it keeps going off. Like, I don't want that, because that's stressful. And then I'm not listening to my son because I'm like, can somebody turn that off? Like, so having it be like an equal space for everybody with certain things that are fun, I think is a totally fair approach. But sometimes one that we need permission as a society to have. Yeah. So it's nice to see your stuff coming out and providing that community and connection in its own right. That's like, oh, if I bought this toy, other people are probably interested in those types of clean, or I don't know, whatever.
Simple, like, you know, no, there's these toys that, you know, there's like a whole like aisle at Target. It's like all the multicolored toys with all the sounds and whatever. And it's just like, my kids don't really care for them and they don't last. So it's just kind of like, why would I want that if they're not even going to play with it in a month or two?
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
You know.
The ones that have longevity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so going back to like the beginning, so, you know, you were saying how those conversations that you were having with other women were like really good. So like, take me from there to when you got the idea for the den.
I actually had the idea for the den before Postpartum Support International. I just didn't know what it was. I just know that I wanted. I remember going to my grandma, who was like batshit crazy. I went to her house with my daughter and started crying to her, and I was like, what are you doing, Chandler? Like, she's barely there. I don't know what you're looking for here. And so then when I was driving back, like, God rest her soul and all that jazz, but I was like driving back and I was like, I need a space to go to that's not like my senile grandma's house. And like, that was the first aha moment. I was driving over the Golden Gate Bridge and I was like, I need a space. And I'm sure every parent ever has thought that as well. But then in being like, okay, I need a space, don't know anything more than that. I just want to apply myself to connecting with people right now, because I love like vulnerability and authenticity and like people having these raw conversations. It's like such an honor to me. So that's when I found Postpartum Support International. I started working on that, and it was like kind of like subconsciously building in my head. And then I learned of this term called matrescence. It's this term that anthropologists have been using since like, I think the 80s. Matrescence sounds like adolescence. It's this transition into motherhood, and there's so much that goes into it that's similar to adolescence. Like, your body is changing, your relationship to self, to society, like it's all an evolution. And so when I heard that term, I started looking it up because it validated so much of what I was going through, as seeing it as an evolution instead of like a dip. It was like, no, it was like a building actually. And so there's this reproductive psychologist named Dr. Orly Apin who teaches out of Columbia. She teaches a matrescence course. And so I applied to take that class for a semester, and COVID willing, they accepted me into the program, and so I got to take that remotely. And so when I was taking that course and learning so much more than just the intuitive thoughts I was having, but like, oh, like look at these studies, like look at what Israel has done or studied, or like Australia seems a little more advanced in how they think about maternal mental health. And so understanding all of these things that existed was another step for me that's like, okay, it is happening. It's not like people aren't curious about what's going on, but maybe there could be better liaisonship between academia and a lay person in terms of all the stuff that's going on, because when you get in, you experience the amazing academic crowds, you're like, oh, like sometimes this can stay a little insular because it's hard to digest or translate to somebody who's just coming into the conversation. So that was another moment of, okay, I need a space, and I want it to be a space that creates creates permission for vulnerability and connection. And I want it to be a space where people are like, actually, what you're feeling is normal. because of XYZ, and kind of a little more backed by data. So having those experiences is what led me to my version of the den. And then if you're familiar with MVP, minimum viable product, I was like, what's the MVP of the den? It's a coffee shop, essentially. It's like a one space. We're not gonna like get funding for this and have it be this like tricked out facility. It's like, okay, we just sort of need to test this MVP in a coffee shop setting that is a lounge to start facilitating that conversation and that connection, and have coffee like we all want, or most want. And so that was kind of the process of the ideation. I worked with an amazing interior designer. She'd be so embarrassed. I love her so much. I'm like obsessed with her.
I mean, from the pictures that I've seen, it looks beautiful. Like, and it looks like exactly like what you're saying, and you want the feel for the place. That's what it looks like on the outside for somebody who's never even been there.
That's great to hear.
So, nice. So well done. Well done to your interior designer.
And Emily, she did a great job. I think, so we had this like design, I don't remember what terminology, but like a Northern Star that we would go after. And we had said, what if we had like an older half sister who was like 12 years ahead of us in life and whose kids were older, but so she had the nice house, but she still had the toys from when her kids were little. So you come to her house and she serves you coffee or tea and you feel so taken care of, and you don't have to bring anything because she's been through it before, but you can have that reprieve. So Karen really took that and ran with it. So there's like that, and then like a hotel in Copenhagen. Like, can we mash those together? And that's
I've been seeing that you guys have been doing like more, like bringing like physical therapists in and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we have a Zen room where people can do whatever they need to be Zen, and we can rent it out to practitioners. So like we have a pelvic PT who'll rent it once a month, and then her clients can come and use the lounge later on. Or we're starting with a pediatric PT who's like, seeing toddlers. But we also have like drop-in. So again, that goal that I saw with Postpartum Support International, where they were connecting them to resources that they might not otherwise have the context to know they needed. We have so many amazing practitioners who come through the den. And so I'll team up with them. Like I had Britta DeStefano is always like one of my favorite examples. She's so talented as like a pediatric PT, but she works a lot with babies. So she did drop-in session, 15-minute like baby body work sessions where people just come and they're like, hey, here's my like one question. Is this torticollis or whatever? And have her see it. It's short enough that they feel safer knowing if they want to book something longer term, or maybe they just got their needs met for that day. And then they were with like 16 other parents who came in with similar questions and similar baby ages. So we're starting to do more of that as well to bridge that connection for practitioners and like community.
What is your hope for the future for the den?
I would love for the den to be a place where people come to feel empowered or to empower others, all of the above, and for it to become known for that it's a place that you feel a certain way when you come in. And I think that that would be an amazing ripple effect to happen. That's like, hey, like I go to this place and these people make me feel worthy and proud of myself enough to stand up for myself in other arenas of my life. And I just think that people would be happier that way. And I think in terms of like BD, I want there to be more dens. I want it to be a space that is your third place, which is kind of a buzzy term right now, but like that is what I want it to be. And for people who don't know what your third place is, it's like, you have maybe home, work in this third place to build community. So I'd love there to be dens in other locations where it's like, I know I go to the den and I build community, and maybe in a different, I'm visiting my sister and there's a den there and I want to see what community looks like there versus here. And kind of like you're saying, like, or what we were saying way earlier about culturally different parenting. There's also subcultures obviously within America of different parenting, and just having it be a space that's promoting coexistence and our ability to believe that we can thrive as parents so that our kids can thrive.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. That's the thing. Ultimately, I think that it's good for open conversations, making people feel less alone, and just coming together in spaces that are, like you said, the third space. I think that that's great.
Yeah.
Now I just need one here. That's all.
Don't worry. You're like 11, but it's coming. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And I like to end it with a question. What is the very last toy that you bought?
Well, the last toy I bought for the den was a cash register.
Oh, cute.
Cash register. They love it. Hands down, like all the kids just want to like be their parents and like buy stuff. So I got this little wooden one that has like the tiniest little beeper.
Oh, that's really cute.
I'm obsessed with it. I'm like, I'm gonna hit it now. But yeah,
I love that.
Yeah,
that's good. The last thing that I bought was something super random. Like, I think it was like one of those like sensory things off of Amazon. I was like, oh, cute. This, like, they'll love to squish this or something random. My youngest son.
Slugs.
Oh, yes.
Oh my God, I love them.
I know, and my kids don't like them, and I'm like, why?
Or for you.
Oh, no, I know what it was. I don't think they're in here. I bought these like acrylic blocks that if you like put them in like the windowsill, the like light shines through them, and I love them, and my kids are like, this is not fun. And I'm like, but it is.
Just try it again.
I'm like, come look at the lights with me. All right, well, I am going to let you go. I've kept you over time, but thank you again, and we should definitely do this again soon.
Sounds good. Count me in. And thank you for all of your awesome questions. It's fun to talk about yourself.
Yeah, it's good. Chandler and I had some really good conversations. She has created an incredible space for families to come and both parents and kids to get enjoyment out of it. If you live near the den, definitely go and check it out. I'll include the details in the caption below, and definitely subscribe and like, and stay tuned for the next episode.